Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I'm Dr. Daniel Amen.
And I'm Tana Amen. Here we teach you how to win the fight for your brain to defeat anxiety, depression, memory loss, ADHD, and addictions.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is brought to you by Amen Clinics, where we've transformed lives for 3 decades using brain SPECT imaging to better target treatment and natural ways to heal the brain. For more information, visit amenclinics.com.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is also brought to you by BrainMD, where we produce the highest quality nutraceutical products to support the health of your brain and body. For more information, visit brainmdhealth.com. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast.
Hey everybody, we are so excited to start a new series called Success Starts Here. And obviously what we mean is between your ears, that there have been so many books about success, and almost all of them that we've ever heard of or ever read ignore the most important organ that's responsible for success.
Yeah, it seems to me like they probably never have taken it into consideration or don't know, because they focus on things like habits or relationships, but they don't think about the fact that those things won't ever be better if you've got a brain problem. And I never really understood the impact of this either until I started to see your work when we started dating. I was so sort of fascinated.
Well, that's what's kept you here for 12 years.
Well, that's not what's kept me here, but it did fascinate me.
Yeah, you almost canceled your first date.
I almost did.
I was a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And you're like, well, they're all crazy.
Because the ones I have met have not been helpful. Not at all. So
in our society, we think that we have the notion of success and failure backwards.
Right.
We've been taught that if you dream big, work hard, have passion, purpose, and a positive mindset, if you learn from your mistakes and persist, you can be anything you want in life. Unfortunately, that's just not true.
And it's sad.
It's a myth.
It's sad and it's hard.
And if the physical functioning of your brain is not properly balanced, no amount of trying harder using success principles will get you to where you want to be. In fact, based on the brain imaging work we do here at Amen Clinics, we discovered that the harder some people try, the worse things actually get for them, that their brains actually drop in activity when they try. And so they try and it doesn't work. They try and it doesn't work. They try and it doesn't work. And then they say, to heck with it, and they stop
Well, and they probably
trying.
feel demoralized, I would think.
It's a concept that Martin Seligman has. He's a psychologist from the University of Pennsylvania, called learned helplessness.
I like that term.
And it's you try and it doesn't work, you try and it doesn't work, and then you give up, and then people blame you.
And you sort of think you can't do it, so what the heck?
Or they blame you as lazy, and so on. So it's really counterintuitive to what most people have taught. But any program or book on success that ignores where success truly starts in the physical functioning of your brain is doomed to failure, because anyone who tries to follow these steps to success will not be able to focus, remember, or implement the strategies on a consistent basis. So in this series, and in a new book I'm working on, take a look at success and how to achieve it, as well as failure and how to avoid it. And you really like this story.
I love this story. So I'm going to digress for 1 second, because this is really cool. You're right. I almost canceled my first date with you. I actually didn't know who he was. I did not know who you were when we went out. So unlike a lot of people, that recognize him or know who he is, he wasn't on PBS at the time. So I didn't actually know who you were. And I just thought your work was sort of interesting and fascinating, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, different than most psychiatrists. That was enough to sort of keep me interested.
You didn't know who I was.
I'm sure you probably did, didn't you? So, but I felt like an idiot when I actually found out. So 3 things happened within a couple of weeks. One, you invited me to hear you speak, and I show up, and there's these like there's like over 1,000 like just raving fans running up with their books to be signed. And I'm like, I think I missed something. Like what's going on here? So that was kind of funny. And then the second thing was, maybe it was a week later or so, we were walking and this woman came running up to you and she was crying and she said, "You saved my son's life." And I'm like, there's something super cool going on here. Like, this is really interesting. And there was there's a story where one of my friends calls me, and she's got a child who has always been troubled. She's one of Chloe's little friends when they were babies, but this child was growing up to be troubled. We could see it from day one. It was just, she wasn't like other kids, right? Getting in more trouble, with just screaming, falling, just not the same. And not doing things the same way other kids were doing. And so she calls me one day, she says she was pretty successful. And so she was trying really hard to get into the places that she knew would be helpful. She'd done a lot of research and she calls me and we'd only been dating like a month. And so she says, "I finally got into this doctor I've been trying to get in to see like for over a year. He won't take new patients. Like, no way in. And I finally was able to, through someone I know, get her in to see this doctor." And I'm like, "Oh," I go, "that's really cool." She said, "Yeah, he's like this amazing child psychiatrist." She's like going on. And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." I go, "Well, let me know." I said, "If you want to talk to, maybe just have me mention this to the guy that I'm dating a child psychiatrist. Maybe he'd have something to say about it." She's like, "Nope. I already it took me so long to get this appointment. I've got this covered." I'm like, "All right." She's like, "But who are you dating?" And I mentioned your name and she literally starts screaming on the other end of the phone. It was you she was talking about. So I was like, wait a minute, how am I missing all this stuff? But the final thing, so I said there were 3, there was actually 4. The final thing was this, and it all sort of happened pretty close together, all these things in succession. And I had to take a step back and go, wait, like this is really cool. So it got my attention, and it takes a lot to get my attention. I'm not easily impressed. Someone wrote you a letter and it was amazing. And I was astounded actually by this letter. And so it's one of my favorite stories of all the things that you've done. We've got a lot of really great stories, but I want to read it because it was one of the things early on that just really hooked me. So this is Dale. Okay, this is the story of Dale. He was brought to the clinics in shackles at the age of 17. And, by all accounts, this guy was failing. He was failing in life. He wasn't getting a job. He was, hadn't done well in school. He'd been kicked out of his house and now he's in jail. So here's his story. And we have permission to read it. It says, "Dear Dr. Amen, I am the mother of Dale Bream, who was treated at Amen Clinics in 1999. Dale was in trouble with the law and brought to the clinic in Northern California in shackles. After he was evaluated, scanned, and treated, Dale was able to be gainfully employed for a year in retail sales. He then joined the Army, where he excelled. After basic training, Dale became a Special Forces Army Ranger. Dale was able to make a success of his life because of the treatment he received. Dale was killed in action in Iraq on March 18th, 2006. Just 3 days before his 24th birthday. We take great comfort in knowing Dale died a hero. I thought you might be interested in the part you played in this hero's life. Dale was buried at, my eyes are starting to water. Dale was buried at Arlington Cemetery with great honor. Here is part of the Department of Defense release press on Dale's death, or press release, on Dale's death. A Ranger team leader, Bream was a 6-time veteran of Operations Enduring and Iraqi Freedom. His awards and decorations include the Army Commendation Medal for Valor, Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Achievement Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Iraqi Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, and many more. He was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star Medal for Valor, Purple Heart, and 2 Army Commendation Medals. Thank you, Laura, proud mother of Sergeant Dale Bream.
Yeah, it still brings.
It's one of my favorite stories.
And so when you think about failure, he was there. I mean, there's just very few things besides being in an orange jumpsuit and shackles and being put in a cage.
Well, and a lot of
That
people
is the ultimate of failure, and being a decorated war hero, dying serving your country, is the ultimate in success.
and I know there are people who are the automatic thing is, well, he died and he died young. Someone headed down that road was likely to not have a very long life, and if they did, it wouldn't have been a very good life, but not usually a long life by statistically speaking. He died doing something with purpose, something amazing.
We're going to talk about purpose in this course for sure, but he died on his terms,
right?
Doing something he loved,
that he was good at,
a mission that was greater than himself, and rather his mom and dad hating themselves because he didn't turn out the way they wanted to, he was able to make them proud. And I'm a former infantry medic, U.S. Army, 3rd Armored Division. After I got out, went to medical school, I went back and did my psychiatric training at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And so, when I left the Army 10 years later as an Army major. So this is a population that's very important to me.
Yeah, it really bothers me. It's something that burdens my heart, that we need to do better with our veterans.
So I have a very special place in my heart for veterans and Army personnel or military personnel.
So do I.
And we don't do a good job of taking care of their brains. But ask yourself, so where does success start? And so if we think of the things of success, where does happiness start in your brain? Where does feeling relaxed or stressed out start?
In your brain.
In your brain. Where does a healthy body or obesity and diabetes start?
Your brain's related to motivation, purpose. Absolutely.
But, when we say obesity and diabetes, people go, oh, your pancreas. And I'm like, no, it starts in the moment by moment decisions your brain makes every day. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about decisions.
And being able to focus.
Where do great relationships start, or where do abusive relationships start?
Yeah.
And I know for you, that was sort of a new idea.
It was a very new idea, but it made sense.
Where does getting into the college of your dreams start? Or where does dropping out of school start in your brain? Where does financial success or bankruptcies start in your brain? In the moment by moment decisions you make every day, where does all success and all failure start? Between your ears. So you shouldn't take care of your brain because it's sort of a cool thing to do. It's absolutely an essential thing to do.
So, and I know some people listening, because I know I've been through some really hard health challenges and things like that. There are some people who are going to hear this and they're going to say, but nothing in my brain would have changed the fact that I got X disease, or that I got, in my case, the type of cancer I got, or whatever. But I'm going to push back a little bit as somebody who's been down that road to hell and depressed and all those things. I didn't have this information, so I didn't know, and I couldn't be my own advocate. But the truth is, I could have gone through that easier, recovered faster, and made a lot better decisions had I known. I had no idea. And that was why I did not like psychiatrists. They put me on a wrong medication that made me behave, in a way that I just didn't care about anything. So well,
psychiatry is really a brainless, organless profession.
Which is ridiculous.
And I say that sadly. But
I say it. I will say this: it's ridiculous.
It's the only medical specialty that never looks at the organ it treats. Now, listening to the podcast, you don't have to get a scan to get benefit out of that.
No,
but a scan can be super helpful. So over the next 8 more podcasts, we're going to talk about creating sustainable joy. And where does that start? In the
your
pleasure
brain.
centers
Yeah.
of your brain. And are you wearing them out or
So-
are you supporting them? So we're going to talk about that.
So what I hear you saying is that you actually can control and help yourself feel more joy or less joy by the decisions you make.
And by the habits you engage in that are good for your brain or bad for it.
Right. That's
Then
cool.
we're going to talk about thinking like a CEO. So strengthen the brain's executive center to make great decisions and avoid ones that ruin your life. We've been just hit, day after day with, these famous people being fired for sexual indiscretions. And, we had a podcast recently about men behaving badly.
I know we need to do one on women behaving badly too, though.
Well, having 5 sisters, absolutely. Then we're going to talk about change. There's a podcast called Embrace Change. The brain hates change, but you can turn your ruts into superhighways of success. We'll talk about how to do that. The next one on Master Your Mind, how to feel happy and present while conquering worrying and negativity. We have undisciplined minds as a society. We're just so quick to react. We're going to get the monkey mind trained and under control. We'll talk about connect, how to reinforce, how to use your brain to have better relationships. And then, I think my favorite podcast is Think Different. When people do bad things, ask why, then get them help, sort of like Dale. We're going to talk about fueling success. So here, your work with nutrition will be the star. And finally, love your brain so you can love your life. How to engage in the habits that'll boost your energy and keep your brain strong for a lifetime. It's your brain. You remember in 1992 when Clinton was running for president, and his campaign manager, James Carville, came up with, it's the economy, stupid, right? It does, no other message mattered. And I've often thought since then, it's the brain, stupid. It's like, focus, keep it clear. It's the brain.
And protect it.
Love it. Stay with us. Welcome back to Success Starts Here, our series on how to get the most out of your brain and your life. And this session is called Create Sustainable Joy. Protect your brain's pleasure centers to live with passion and purpose, and avoid addictions and depression.
What I like about this title is that it's true. You can create joy. A lot of people keep waiting to feel joy. They keep waiting for something to happen so that they will feel happiness or they will feel joy. And what most people don't realize is that because of the way you are wired, you can actually do things to help create that joy. So it puts you, it's an empowering thought.
Or you can deaden your pleasure centers and feel sad and apathy.
So understanding how joy is actually sort of created in your body from a sort of a biological, physiological standpoint is really important.
Well, and there are 2 neurotransmitters that we want you to understand, dopamine and serotonin.
Right.
So dopamine works in what is really called the pleasure motivation circuit in the brain. And there's structures called the basal ganglia, nucleus accumbens. I really think of them as like little pleasure buttons in the brain that you push on them and you feel happy. But if you push on them too much or too hard, you wear them out, and then it requires more and more.
So people who like to go
to feel anything at all.
So people who like to go faster and faster, or they become addicted to pornography, or they become addicted to drugs. The more you do, it's like, I need more to get that feeling. You're wearing out those pleasure centers, right?
Right. And but first, let's start. Is purpose good for your brain? Are people who are purposeful, I think you're a purposeful person. Is that good for your brain? Well, the studies actually say you bet. Better mental health, less depression, greater happiness, more satisfaction, personal growth, self-acceptance, better sleep, and you live longer.
Don't you live like 11 years longer?
Significantly longer. Over time, they have a reduced incidence of Alzheimer's disease. They have less mild cognitive impairment. They have a slower rate of cognitive decline in old age. So we should be living a very long time because we spend our lives purposeful.
Right.
Right?
Well,
I think the Brain Warriors Way was just our statement in the sand. It's a war, and we're going to lead you to a better life.
Well, and purpose is double-edged. So if you think about purpose, it's like, oh, people, it's like if I have purpose, I'm going to live longer just because I'm doing something purposeful. But the flip side of that is that when you have a strong purpose, you tend to make better decisions. For example, I have this thought in my head that I really want to be here for my daughter. Okay, so that's a major part of my purpose, right? So whether it's because of the work we're doing or because of my daughter or whatever it is, that drives very, very strong. That keeps me making better decisions, right? Because if I make bad decisions, I won't be here for her.
You won't get what you want.
Right.
And that's very important. If you stay with us, we're actually going to talk to you about how to create purpose in your own life in a very short period of time.
But I see a lot of I've seen this a lot where even some of the moms will go out at lunchtime and they're like, I know they love their kids. They're taking good care of their kids, but they'll drink at lunch and then get in their cars and drive. And I'm like, see, to me, those are connected. Does that make sense? I would be afraid to do that. I would not do that because I would be afraid of the consequences and not being there for my child.
Forethought. That's frontal lobes. We're going to talk about them next. So how do you know if you have purpose in your life? Answer these 5 questions. 1, I feel good when I think of what I've done in the past and what I hope to do in the future. 2, I have a sense of direction and purpose in life. 3, I enjoy making plans for the future and working them to a reality. 4, I'm an active person in carrying out plans I set for myself. And 5, some people wander aimlessly through life, but I am not one of them.
I like this, but I'm going to push back on number 1. So what I've done in the past and what I hope to do in the future, many people have really hard past. They've either made bad decisions or they've been a victim of something in the past. That does not mean that you cannot shift that into being very, like, using it as fuel for purpose in the future. Certainly, I know a lot of people that almost, like, the more painful their stories are, and we've written a lot about them, the more driven they are to be purposeful.
So if I think about it, I was beaten up a lot as a little kid and anxious and smaller than everyone else. And I can focus on that. And you grew up in a lot of chaos. You can think about that and be really upset, or you can think of the amazing times you had, and you had amazing times with your mom and with your grandmother. And, certainly I got to hang out with my grandfather who made fudge. That was awesome. And where you bring your attention often determines how you feel. We're going to talk about that in mastering your mind.
And the other thing is if you do have something in your past, an unresolved trauma, or you were a victim of something, or you made bad decisions, you were the person making bad decisions, it doesn't mean, like, do something empowering to pull yourself out of that. I think of that as an unresourceful state. Right? That is going to drag you down. That will not give you purpose. Thinking about that and dwelling on those awful things in the past. For me, like, I love doing what we do. I practice karate because, as somebody who grew up in that chaotic environment, there were some physical things that had happened. I like feeling empowered. Those things take me out of that. They put me in a more resourceful state, like, almost instantly. I think being proactive is really important.
So in an upcoming lesson, we're going to talk about embracing change and learning from the failures.
Yes.
So if you have a learning mindset, then they become incredibly important
Right.
to you. So I want to talk just a little bit about the addiction cycle. That's where people engage in actions that increase dopamine. So we talked about these two neurotransmitters, or we should. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that increases the feeling of pleasure. It works in the pleasure centers. It increases focus and motivation. When it's too low, people feel sad. They feel unmotivated, hopeless, helpless, worthless. When it's too high, they feel anxious, agitated, can be aggressive, confused, even psychotic sometimes. Serotonin, on the other side, they balance each other,
Right.
dopamine and serotonin. Serotonin, when it's healthy, it helps you feel happy and optimistic, helps you sleep. When it's too low, people get depressed, anxious, obsessive. And when it's too high, they feel apathetic and passive. So these two counterbalance each other. Most addictive drugs are not boosting serotonin,
Right.
although ecstasy does that. But most of them boost dopamine.
Right.
And so you feel high, you feel pleasure.
So like
feel
methamphetamines,
awesome.
crystal, cocaine.
Nicotine, caffeine, methamphetamines, cocaine, and so on. And so
the dopamine is that sort of like gives you drive. And the
Gives you
serotonin
drive.
is like, oh, don't worry, be happy, like chill.
correct. And so the addiction cycle is you engage in actions that increase dopamine.
Right.
So you mentioned pornography.
Right.
You also mentioned methamphetamines. You mentioned cocaine. And the more you do it, the more you press on your pleasure
And it's the
centers.
same part of the brain, right? For the drugs versus the pornography.
Well, and new love presses on that too. So that's why I tell people don't get married in 8 days after you met
Right.
someone. Let the cocaine effect wear off. So the more you engage in a behavior that dumps dopamine, cocaine, for example, dumps dopamine into your brain, it begins to wear those pleasure centers out. And they get what we call tolerant. So it actually takes more and more cocaine,
Right.
pornography, new love, in order to feel normal. So that's the important thing. It takes more and more of that behavior.
Which is why you see
to
them go into dark
feel
places.
Normal.
Right.
Which is why they end up getting strung out or addicted.
Or on TV,
or
on the news. What's going on lately?
behavior That is just crazy.
So what about daredevils? The same thing? Fast cars,
Same thing.
jumping out of planes.
They're looking for that. They're looking to turn their brains on. They get that pleasure rush in their brain. So you engage in the behavior. You feel high when dopamine wears off. So I really want people to go for the dopamine drip. So
we did that in the hospital all the time.
rather than the dopamine,
You just like took me back.
rather than the dopamine rush or the dopamine dump, you want to go for the dopamine drip. So living with purpose is sort of a dopamine drip. Now, we get a lot of great stories from people who follow our work, and that's sort of like a dopamine rush.
Right.
But you want a consistent, low-level, positive feeling in order to keep those parts of your brain healthy. So when dopamine wears off from, you have a dopamine squirt or dopamine splash, we'll have to find the right word for this, it wears off. So you feel flat, sad, depressed. And so you re-engage in the dopamine behavior like gambling,
Right.
even if it's bad for you, even if you've had negative societal consequences.
Right.
Your wife has left you, you've been arrested, you have to file for bankruptcy. Shopping for some people. It's like, oh, I found that thing. It's not you, obviously not you.
Shoot me now.
And so with intense stimulation, the pleasure centers need more and more excitement in order to feel anything at all. And we actually have two conditions that you wear out these pleasure centers quickly. One is ADD, because with ADD, you actually have low dopamine levels in the brain.
Right.
So people, unless they get treated, and the treatment we use is dopamine enhancing supplements or dopamine enhancing medications, they tend to be excitement seeking, conflict driven. They tend to drive fast. They tend to use stimulants like coffee or
But you kind of think that I
cigarettes.
work out like I do and go practice karate because I like dopamine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked before.
But I'm
you
not.
have ADD.
But I'm not one of those crazy because I'm too anxious. To
Yeah,
do.
you have the anxious type of ADD. You know, as we've talked before, there's 7 different types, but the classic type, they're just stimulation.
And the thing I like about exercise is it actually increases all of the good neurotransmitters and hormones. It increases serotonin, dopamine, and the endorphins. So you feel balanced. You feel good. That's why people always say, "Oh, I feel so good when I exercise."
The other condition we should talk about just for a minute is Parkinson's disease. Because in Parkinson's disease, the dopamine neurons start to die.
Right.
Especially in an area of the brain called the substantia nigra. And I had this one patient who was the father of one of my college friends, and just the nicest religious man, calm, sweet, moral. When he got Parkinson's-like syndrome, he started to fall in love with Jerry Springer
Oh God.
and Dr. Phil. And he just waited for those shows to come on. And I think it's because, it's like, why? Right? He needed that dopamine splash
right.
in order to feel normal. So, families having sex with each other.
I could have invited him over for Thanksgiving. Would have gotten the same thing.
Jerry Springer had nothing on your family. That's true. But why scary movies?
I don't know. Someone please tell me. I got drugged to these horror movies when I was 9 years old.
So is Saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in 3D? Are they dopamine drips or are they dopamine dumps?
They just scare the hell out of me.
But
That's
what do you
all I
think?
know is I want to run.
Well, what do you think they're doing inside someone's brain?
Well, it's dopamine, obviously.
And
It's
it's not
dumping
a
dopamine.
drip.
But I don't understand
Right. I mean,
it.
going to like a spectacular movie. We just watched Good Will Hunting.
Right.
It's a fabulous movie.
Okay, and I admit, I do like movies like Taken because I love justice. So,
And that's a dopamine
but that's a
dump
different
sort of
kind
movie.
of dopamine
But
dump.
it's your dopamine
It's my
dump.
dopamine dump, yes. I want justice in mine.
Or some of the Fast and Furious movies. You love those.
Love those,
with your
yes.
guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So how to protect your pleasure centers to feel lifelong joy. So I'm going to give you some principles. You have to limit the use of constantly stimulating devices and activities such as smartphones, gaming, shopping, pornography, scary movies, and high-risk activities.
So we should probably not gloss over that too much. We got to give them something to do instead.
It's coming.
Okay.
Stay
Just
with
making
me.
sure.
Stay with me. Engage in regular exercise,
Yes.
especially something you love that does not endanger your brain, such as karate, but without head
I
contact.
got to tell you, there's nothing that feels better than going and just beating the hell out of bags. It's just fun. It
least
just
it's
feels
not
good.
me.
It's like therapy.
So karate, dancing, swimming, tennis, table tennis. Meditation protects your brain while boosts activity in your pleasure centers. You want to make time to laugh. Humor enhances the pleasure centers and doesn't wear them out. Connect meaningful activities and pleasures, such as volunteering for activities you love. For example, I love table tennis, enjoy keeping score for others during tournaments. I'm doing something purposeful that I love. Start every day by thinking of 3 things that you're grateful for. Small dopamine.
See, I actually think that really works. And it sounds so trivial. It sounds so minor. And it's not. It actually really works. If you do that consistently for a week, it will, I promise you'll start to feel better.
And think of one person you appreciate every day, another small dopamine trip, and
I
then
love
reach
that.
out to them and tell the person you appreciate them with a text or an email. So you're building a bridge of gratitude. So
I love
you just did a little dopamine squirt in their brain,
Yeah.
or a dopamine drip in their brain. Seek pleasure in the little things in life, such as a walk with a friend, holding hands with your spouse, a great meal, or a meaningful church service. So positive things that activate dopamine, meaning and purpose, lasting love, volunteering, relationships, new learning, traveling to places where they speak English and take
Oh God!
dollars.
Seriously, we're not having therapy on the air right now. He does not want to go to vacation anywhere out of the U.S. anymore. He's just like
Did
done.
you see the volcano in Bali?
Okay.
You wanted to go to Bali.
You know what? I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it.
Pumpkin seeds increase dopamine, as does green tea. Gratitude, appreciation, winning by striving to be your best, losing when it motivates you to practice and be better, and digital discipline. Potentially negative things that activate dopamine, jumping out of airplanes, repeatedly falling in love, high-risk sports like helicopter skiing, marital affairs. People do that as a way to stimulate their brains.
That sounds dangerous, actually.
You're married to you. It's absolutely dangerous.
It would be dangerous.
Excessive video games, pornography, cocaine, methamphetamines, alcohol, fame. And the prayer for some of the young celebrities I see is, Dear God,
Crazy.
please don't let me be famous before my frontal lobes are developed.
Right?
Winning by hurting people, that activates dopamine in a bad way.
What?
Losing when it causes pain, undisciplined digital behavior, scary movies, and gossiping.
I don't understand the winning by hurting other people. How does that stimulate
It's
dopamine?
the Machiavellian kind
Oh.
of winning. I love torturing.
I don't understand
you.
that. That sounds
Well,
terrible.
Think of S&M.
But that sounds terrible.
Well,
doesn't
but
sound like a good
there
thing.
are people whose pleasure centers have been worn out, or they get pleasure by hurting people.
You see, that's why I like movies like Taken and Law Abiding Citizen. That's why I like those movies.
Viktor Frankl, I
love that book.
believed that there were 3 ways to create meaning and
So tell them
purpose.
the name of the book because it's a great book.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes. One
He's
of the
a
best
psychiatrist.
books.
So you don't have to hate all of us.
No, I loved his book.
He said 3 ways to create meaning: purposeful work or being productive, asking questions such as, why is the world a better place? Because I am here. What am I contributing? Love. Loving the people who are central to your life is purposeful. I have a cool story coming up. Courage in the face of difficulty, shouldering whatever difficult fate we have, and helping others shoulder theirs. So in the face of difficulty, Frankl said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. He was a Nazi concentration camp survivor.
I mean, his story's horrifying, but it was great.
He encouraged his patients to see meaning in life's moments and to direct their focus away from painful moments to ones that were more appealing. Love, he says, is the ultimate and highest goal man can aspire to. He also said people find meaning in creative values. So for me, and for you too, it's writing, creating this podcast or courses.
Well, and even things like, I know, helping Chloe, our daughter, helping her when she's really struggling with something. And, that brings me joy. Being able to do that, is wonderful.
Experiential values, mountain climbing, sports, traveling, going out to dinner. Attitudinal values, looking for meaning in situation, even ones that appear meaningless. And there's a story about Frankl treating an older man who could not stop grieving the loss of his wife. I'll be like that. He asked the man, what would have happened if you had died first and your wife would have had to survive you?
Oh, God.
Oh, the man replied, for her this would have been terrible. How she would have suffered. Frankl said, see, such a suffering has been spared her.
Oh,
And it is you who have spared her this suffering.
that's a great way to flip that.
But now you have to pay for it by surviving her and mourning her. The man said no word, but shook Frankl's hand and left his office. Frankl believed we can find meaning in difficult situations. I mean, it's like why for years were people saying
that was very powerful. I want to stop for a minute and think about that. If you just think about that for a second, I mean, I know so many parents, they just have this terrible fear of something happening to their child, right? I can't think of anything worse. But if I were to stop and think about, my child having to like raise herself, I mean, there's a lot of ways to spin it, right? It's
always how you take things.
Right.
Right. Always.
It's the part you focus on.
Equation on my board for my patients: A plus B equals C. A is what happens to you in life. B is your interpretation of what happens to you in life, and C is how you act. And C actually has nothing to do with A. It's the B stuff.
Yeah.
It's how you interpret what happens to you.
That's very powerful.
So how can you know your purpose in 5 minutes? There's this great TED Talk by Adam Leipzig. He has like 10 million views, and he's a very successful guy who went to his 25th college reunion at Yale. And he said he made it an astounding discovery. 80% of his privileged, well-off, powerful friends were unhappy with their lives, despite being on their second spouse and their second house.
Isn't that crazy?
The difference between them and the other 20% who were happy was knowing their purpose, which makes sense given the research we've discussed. To know your purpose, Leipzig said you have to know the answer to 5 simple questions. So do it with me.
Okay.
Question number 1, what is your name?
Tana.
Question number 2, what do you love to do? For example, writing, cooking, designing, speaking, parenting, teaching, crunching numbers. What do you love to do?
Parenting. I love being a wife. I love to write books, and I love to teach people. Okay. And I love karate.
Question 3, who do you do it for?
That's a crazy question because I not only do it for the people that I'm trying to help. I mean, I do it for you. I do it for Chloe. I do it for our community. But quite frankly, I do it because it feels good. So I do it for both.
Okay. So for me, for Chloe, for your community, what do we need from you?
I would say for me to be healthy and invest time and be my best person, be my best self, to be wise, not making bad decisions. I mean, that's what I would say.
So we need consistency and
love
and information
and good decision making, and which equals consistency.
Listening. Yes.
Right.
Okay. How do these people change as a result of what you do?
Oh, well, with my daughter, I mean, I think that's fairly an easy one. When you spend time with your kids, I mean, I'm watching her turn into this amazing young woman. I mean, she's just amazing. She's like far beyond what I ever imagined being at her age. So I'm seeing that happen before my eyes. I see our patients get well, lose 100 pounds, some of them.
I mean, just the story of Denny recently.
Right.
Right.
The veteran that we brought in. But I mean, they lose weight, they feel better, they have purpose, they have passion. So
notice,
my marriage.
3 out of these 5 questions actually have nothing to do with you. They're outward facing.
Right.
Isn't that cool?
I love that.
So for mine, my name is Daniel. I love optimizing people's brains and inspiring them to take care of it. I love doing it within the context of our team. We do it for our families, those who come to our clinics, read our books, watch our shows. The people we touch want to suffer less, to feel better, to be sharper, greater control over their lives. They want better brains and better lives. As a result of what we do, people change. By having better brains and better lives, they suffer less, become happier and healthier, and they pass it on. So only 2 of the 5 questions are about me, 3 are about others.
Right.
The happiest people Leipzig knows, and that I know, and you know, are outward facing, focusing more on the people they serve than on themselves.
You know, especially women, I don't know, I've never been a man, but women can very quickly, just speaking, from a female perspective and knowing my friends and myself, when, like you always even tell me, I'm dangerous without a project. So
you
it's
are.
true. I'm dangerous without a purpose. I'm dangerous without something that I'm doing that's meaningful, because we can get caught up in the craziest things in our head. I mean, even the little stuff. I mean, I know I mope around and I pout and I'm like, my life has no meaning as soon as we finish a book, right? But I can also then start to hyper focus on my own personal flaws. And I know women are famous for that. They notice the lines on their face, they notice their thighs, they notice, every tiny thing. When you are not focusing on helping other people or doing something bigger than yourself in the world, it's very quick. It happens very fast and insidiously, just like you begin to focus on things that bring you down.
So let me read this paragraph. I'm working on it in the book. Leipzig closes his talk by teaching us a powerful technique. He says, when you're at a gathering and someone asks you, what do you do? Answer them by telling them the answer to question number 5. In my example, when people ask me what I do, I might say, as a result of what we do, people have better brains and better lives. They suffer less, become happier and healthier, and pass it on to others. By answering that simple question, I get to share my life's purpose with everyone I meet.
Interesting.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, I really like
All
that.
right. So summarizing the key strategies to creating a joyful life, to live with love, passion, meaning, and purpose over a prolonged period of time. 1, focus on what you truly want in a balanced way. That helps to prevent burnout. What do you want in your relationships? I want to have a kind, caring, loving, passionate relationship with you. I want to raise healthy kids that I'm happy
And I
with
think this is
connected
important to write down, to take time to really write it down.
Write down what you want. Limit substances and activities that wear out your pleasure centers, such as caffeine, nicotine, pornography, digital addictions, high-risk behavior, scary movies. 3, engage in high-value activities that increase dopamine and strengthen your pleasure centers in a healthy way. Getting more sunlight actually boosts dopamine. Exercise, massage, listening to pleasurable music. 4, reach out to help others. 5, focus on living each moment with meaning and purpose and eliminate things that don't much matter. Next lesson, we're going to talk about saying no to yourself and others. And 6, live with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So when I
like that. That's one of my favorites.
So I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when I was in college.
Yeah.
I took a class on death and dying.
So did I, yeah.
And so
we both went to Christian colleges, so I think that's sort
we
of...
had to write our own funerals.
Right.
And so I always think about, does this, and you and I talk about this a lot, if what I'm going to do now and the problem I have now, does it have eternal value?
That saves me. It literally saves me from sometimes either having a nervous breakdown or killing someone else. Because like things happen right in your day. Things happen that just set you off. Like we had the wrong floor put in our house. Like stuff like that happens. And it's easy to just like go, oh my gosh.
Did it have eternal value?
No, we stopped. We helped each other through this because we both got really angry at first. And then we wait a second. This doesn't have eternal value. There's a solution somewhere.
Close.
There's a solution somewhere. We will figure it out. Let it go.
Anger dumps dopamine too. So you want to get rid of that. All right. Stay with us. Success starts here.
Welcome back. We're talking about Success Starts Here. We are on the 3rd lesson for Success Starts Here, and this is regarding the CEO in your brain.
Think like a CEO. Strengthen your brain's executive center to make great decisions and avoid ones that ruin your life. So we started with love, passion, purpose, because it really provides the energy and motivation for your life. But if you don't have a break in your head, the passion and purpose can get out of control and you will crash. And so this lesson is really about the prefrontal cortex, largest in humans and any other animal by far. It's 30% of the human brain, 11% of the chimpanzee brain, 7% of your dog's brain, 3% of your cat's brain. That's why they need 9 lives. 1% of the mouse's brain. It's called the executive part of the brain because it's like the boss at work.
Yeah.
And it's involved with the most human functions: focus, forethought, judgment, impulse control, organization, planning, empathy, learning from the mistakes that you make.
Right. I think this is so interesting also because as I got to know what we do more, when I was first involved in what you were doing, it's easy to hear, that my frontal lobes were hurt. They had a head injury and they hurt the front part of their brain. But you don't really understand the long-term ramifications of that, right? So if that CEO takes a vacation, right, it's a really...
When the cat's away,
the mice will play.
Mice will play.
So it's really important to understand
So
why
you wonder,
if you damage
with all
this
rash of men behaving badly,
yeah, I'm not letting them off that easy.
that they didn't have lower frontal lobes. So decreased empathy and made decisions that ultimately
maybe some of them
ruined.
But I'm going to go back to our
lives.
previous lesson about dopamine.
Well, I have that they may
Right.
have worn those pleasure centers out.
Right. And it's
But it's a
power.
combination.
Wait, power stimulates dopamine.
But
Does
it's
it
a
not?
combination of your pleasure centers hijacking the brain and your prefrontal cortex not being strong enough to rein it in. So think of the elephant and the rider. So your limbic or emotional or your pleasure center urges, and can the rider control the elephant? So if the rider is weak and doesn't carry a pointed stick, then the pleasure centers win and you act out even though it could hurt you or hurt somebody else. And so your brain is always doing this dance between pleasure, motivation, drive, and breaking that drive.
Right.
So I like to think of it, the prefrontal cortex is like brakes on a car.
Right.
And you're at the top of a mountain and you have a Ferrari and you want to have a fun time going down the mountain. But what happens very close to the top of the mountain if your brakes don't work?
Right.
You die.
Crash. Right.
Right? You hurt yourself, you hurt other people. And that's what happens when the prefrontal cortex is low. That is why you should never let girls hit soccer balls with their head. And more girls, brand new study out just this week, that the tracks in their brain are actually thinner, more delicate in girls than they are in boys.
Ouch.
There's one study that said 90% of female IQ is in her frontal lobes.
Ouch.
Where for males, it's more widely distributed.
So that's kind of sad because you can.
So
a woman can really
is why
damage.
This is so important, because when there are problems in the prefrontal cortex, short attention span, distractibility, poor planning, lack of perseverance, impulsivity, erratic decision making, chronically late, poor time management, disorganization, procrastination, unavailability of emotions, trouble expressing your thoughts, bad judgment, lack of empathy, trouble learning from experience. You say yes way too often. No is actually a frontal lobe function.
Oh, that's so funny because you say I say no too often.
Do we want to have that discussion here?
You always say the first words out of my mouth are no.
Lack of conscientiousness, which is not you. But frontal lobe issues go with a higher incidence of school failure, divorce, job failure, legal issues, speeding tickets, incarceration, financial problems, and mental health issues, especially ADD and addictions. So you can see protecting this part of your brain is critical to being healthy. My best example, or my favorite example of the prefrontal cortex, is the movie Pinocchio.
Oh, yeah.
And Jiminy Cricket, which is Pinocchio's conscience.
Yeah.
I just encourage everybody to watch Pinocchio and really pay attention to Jiminy Cricket, because he is the prefrontal cortex in the movie. And Breaking Bad.
No, I hate that show.
But I'm not doing it in reference to that show. It's when your brakes are bad.
Oh, I see.
Your
Okay.
life is bad.
Yeah, that show gives me the EBGBs.
Jerry Seinfeld said the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that no one should ever hear.
Right.
And when you hurt your frontal lobes, they get out. If I told you about the time I was at a conference with a friend of mine, and she had been in a car accident, damaged her frontal lobes, and two overweight women were in front of us talking about why they were overweight. And one said to the other, I don't know why I'm overweight. I just eat like a bird. And my friend, so everyone could hear, said, yes, like a bleeping condor.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
And they were so offended. And I turned beet red because I was so embarrassed. And I looked at her like, what is the matter with you? And she put her hand over her mouth and she said, oh no, did that get out? Oh. So we all have, and I was just on CNN talking about the first President Bush, who has been reported by multiple women, 6 now, to be grabbing women inappropriately.
That's so weird.
And he's known to have something called vascular Parkinsonism, which is, you have vascular problems anywhere in your brain, they're everywhere in your brain. So they're also affecting his frontal lobes. And how many guys, when they see a cute girl, don't want to grab her, but their frontal lobes inhibit.
I'm sorry, go back to that. What?
The guys will understand. How many times when you see a cute girl, you go, oh, well, that would be nice.
And if
but you inhibit it because you have a wife like mine, or you just know it's inappropriate.
If you think that we don't know you're thinking that, like we know you're thinking that, okay? So...
But you don't act on it because you have frontal lobe function. But if you hurt or damage your frontal lobes, if you don't sleep, you have lower frontal lobe function.
That makes sense.
If you don't eat, you have lower frontal lobe function.
You get more car accidents when you don't sleep.
If you have a high sugar meal 2 hours later, you have low frontal lobe function because it's spiked blood sugar and then dropped blood sugar. So, the prefrontal cortex involved with conscientiousness, which means it's involved in longevity, because in the longest longevity study ever done, 90 years, they found that what went with longevity was not what people would think. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't a lack of stress. It wasn't a lack of anxiety. In fact, the don't worry, be happy people died the earliest.
Crazy, right?
From accidents and preventable illnesses.
We have an entire society focusing on don't worry, be happy.
Yes. Bobby McFerrin was wrong.
Right.
Don't worry, be happy. And the prefrontal cortex is a late bloomer. So most people don't know that. It actually doesn't finish developing until you're 25.
But you know who does know that? The insurance companies.
That's why your insurance rates change at 25.
Right. Because kids get more accidents.
So what disrupts prefrontal cortex? There's 2 processes that go on during development. One is called pruning. Your brain gets rid of tracks it doesn't use. Right. Which is why early learning strategies are important for kids. And a process called myelination. And what that means is over time, all your nerve cells get wrapped with a white fatty substance called myelin. And myelin makes nerve cells work 10 to 100 times faster, more efficiently.
So it's like putting high-speed internet in.
Right. Or putting rubber on copper wires, insulation on copper wires. They just, you can direct the energy in a positive way. It doesn't get scattered all over the place. And that's why teenagers act the way they do.
Right.
Because they're myelinating their frontal lobes. But look at the list of things that disrupt myelin. Smoking, alcohol, drug use, marijuana use, depression, ADHD, brain trauma, toxins, infections, inflammation, a lousy diet. Teenagers are known for lousy diets. Low omega-3 fatty acid levels. New study, 97% of the population is low in omega-3 fatty acids.
Crazy.
Low vitamins B, C, and D, low zinc, low cholesterol, because people think fat's the enemy. Fat is your friend. Low-fat diets. Myelin is 80% fat, excessive stress, limited exercise, and less than optimal sleep. Isn't that nuts? So how do you strengthen the executive part?
So really, though, that list sounds a lot like the other things. Because what's good for your brain is good for your body. What's bad for your brain is bad for your body. So that list, it's the same thing that hurts other things as well. Smoking will kill you. I mean, it gives you cancer, right? So, or emphysema or whatever. So
having low oxygen in your body is bad for your brain.
Right. So it's the same list.
It's always the same.
Right.
List.
It's crazy that we've known this and we still know it and we keep saying it and yet we keep doing it.
So how do you strengthen the prefrontal cortex? You practice saying no to yourself for behaviors that are not helpful.
Right.
Like overeating.
See, this is one of the reasons I like martial arts for kids. Again, like you said, not getting hit in the head, but I really like the discipline involved. It really does teach discipline, and I love that. So it's
practice saying no to others, except your husband. Not
really
not.
Double standard here.
People are taking on too many things.
Yeah,
they are
for
saying
sure.
yes to too many things. When Tony Blair, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said the number one job of a leader is to say no.
Yeah, which I would assume you have to do a lot.
Steve Jobs said, I say no to hundreds of things so I can say yes to one great thing.
To the important things. Agree.
So ask yourself, does this thing I'm going to say yes to fit with the goals I have for my life?
What is it? Which one of our friends had that? Where did we hear that? I love it because it just works. It's like a really quick test. If I can't say hell yes, then it's hell no. Right? If you can't say hell yes, I should do it, then you need to say hell no.
And that actually works your decision. And then you want to strengthen your decision making. How do you do that? You sleep 7 hours or more. You have a healthy blood sugar. Remember the voodoo doll study?
Yes, hilarious.
Researchers took 107 couples and measured their blood sugar before bedtime. And then they gave them voodoo dolls. And they said, we want you to express your feelings about your partner with the pins in the dolls. And the people who had the lowest blood sugar had twice the number of pins in the dolls.
See, I think,
which is totally temp.
Right. I think if I don't eat, I don't really need a voodoo doll for everyone to know how I'm feeling. It's not good.
Hangry.
Yes, I get very hangry.
That's what we call it. And then ask yourself, does this behavior fit the goals I have for my life? But you first have to have goals for your life. And then daily prayer, meditation, self-hypnosis, all of those have been shown to strengthen the prefrontal cortex.
Yep. Love it.
Embrace change. Coming up next, success starts here. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.